In the last video, we saw how we can write to a file using an object called the print writer. And what was nice about the print writer was that it had the same methods that we were used to with system.out. So we could use the print and println and printf methods with the print writer. Now, when we are reading from a file, we are also going to take advantage of the scanner object that we learned to use to read in from the user when they were using the keyboard. So the scanner object already has methods that give us the next line, next int, next float, next byte. So if we already know these methods on the scanner, we can use these methods to read in from a file. Now, the only difference is that instead of reading system.in, we want to read from a file. So when I'm creating a scanner to read from a file, I'm going to say scanner, give it a name, equal new scanner, and then in parentheses, I do not put system.in because I'm not reading from system.in. I want to create an object that refers to a file. And the way we're going to do that is we're going to use a file object. So the first thing is we create a file object, file, give it any name, equal new file. And here we put the file name or the path to the file. And then we create our scanner to start reading from that file. Now, once the scanner is pointing to that file, we can use the methods that we know, next line, next byte, next float. So here's an example. And here in this example, we have several scanners. The first scanner that we're creating is pointing to system.in. Why are we creating the scanner? Because we're going to ask the user for a file name and we're going to read it in. So the program starts by asking the user for the name of a file. We read that file in, and then we're going to use that file name to read from it. So we're asking the user to tell us the file they want us to read from. We create a file object, file, anything equal new file with that file name, and that the purpose of this file object is just to pass it into the scanner because the scanner needs an object in parentheses. Now we have the scanner object pointing to the file. We can start using the scanner to read. Now here we need to know what the file contains. So this code assumes we know the content of the file. We know that it has a line, and then it has a double, and then it has a byte. So when you're reading from a file, just like when you're reading from the user, you need to know what the user is going to give you. When you're reading from a file, you have to know the content of the file. What is the format that the file is in? There is no way for the program to figure that out. You need to be told by the user the format of that file. And then when we're done reading from the file, we need to close the scanner. We always close the object that we're calling methods on. When we were writing, we were writing to print writer, and that's why we would close the print writer. Here, when we're reading from the scanner, so we would close the scanner. Now, is it really important that we close the scanner? Not really important. If you forget to close the scanner, nothing is going to happen. But if you forget to close the print writer, of course, something is going to happen, and that is your file is going to be empty. So this is good practice. Closing the file here, the scanner object, is good practice, so that if there is other code that wants to open the file, they can also do that. So this is just good practice, but it won't break your code. Just like with writing to a file, reading from a file can also cause an exception. If you tell the program to read from a file and that file doesn't exist, your program will throw an exception. And so we also need to have main have the throws IO exception. Now let's do an example of that before we look on and check the next thing. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a project to do that. Let's call it chapter 2. Okay, now I need to import, just like before, I need to import java.io.*. Why? Because file object is in IO. Okay, so that's why I need to import the same package that I imported when I was writing out to a file. And then the second thing I need to do is I need to go next to my main and say throws IO exception. Okay, now the first thing I'm going to do is create a file object. file f equal new file, and here I need to put a file name. So I'm going to go to my project 11.2, and I'm just going to create a file. So I'm going to say new text document. You don't want to use the rich text document format. You want to use just the plain text document, and I'm going to say, let's say test. Okay. And I'm going to put some numbers in it, 10, 20, 30, 40. Save it. And I put 4 numbers in it. So here I'm going to tell it that the name of the file is test.txt. Okay, so that's the first thing we create. The next thing we create is the scanner that points to the file. And like I said with the print writer, with reading from a file, there are also several ways to do it. This is the way that I expect you to be doing for the classwork, using it for the homework assignment and the exams. So anything besides that will result in a 0. So here I'm going to create my scanner. I'm just going to call it in equal new scanner. I'm going to put my file object that I created. So the only purpose of this file object is just for it to be passed here. Now here it's complaining. It says cannot find symbol scanner, and it's because I forgot to import scanner. So let's go and import scanner. .util.scanner. And anytime I create a scanner or a print writer, I immediately close the scanner before I forget, because closing is something that we all forget after we start writing something. So I know that this file has 4 numbers, so I'm going to read them. So I'm going to say let's say int A, B, C, and D. Or you know what? I know that it's 4, so I'm going to write a for loop. So for int I equal to 1, I less than or equal to 4, I plus plus. So I'm writing a loop that runs 4 times. And what it's going to do, it's going to, let's say, add the numbers. So let's create a variable sum equal to 0. And so what I'm going to do is add the numbers in the file. So I'm going to come and I'm going to say int num equal to, I'm going to go to the scanner and say get me the next int. So in the next int, and now I want to add it to sum. So sum plus equal num. And let's at the end print out the sum. System.out.println sum is plus sum. Just to make sure things are right, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to do a system.out.println num. So I want to see what numbers I read from the file. Let's test it out. And it showed me that the 4 numbers it read from the file were 10, 20, 30, 40. And if I add them, that's 30 plus 30, 60 plus 40, 100. So I know the sum is correct. So this is how I will read from a file. Now, this assumed that I knew that this file contained exactly 4 numbers. Is it possible that you get a file and you don't know how many pieces of data it contains? Yes. In that case, you wouldn't be able to write a for loop that says, do this task 4 times, because I know it has 4 times. Well, what if I don't know how many numbers are in the file? What would I do in that case? Well, if you don't know the number, so if you don't know the count, basically number of lines in a file, then what you can do is you can say, I will read until the file no longer has any more content. How can you ask the file if it has content or not? So the file, the scanner object, has a method. So here I have my file object, and then I use the file object in the scanner, and now I'm going to ask the scanner if it has next. Remember, we're using the next methods. Give me the next int, next line. Now I can go and I can say input file or the scanner object has next. I'm going to ask it has next. Basically, do you have something next for me to read? And this has next will return true if there is content that you have not read yet. And so I'm going to use a while loop and say, while the file does not have any, while the file has next, has something next for me to read, I'm going to go and read it. And I'm just going to show you what this looks like. So let's say my file has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Imagine that when you open the file, you have a cursor that is looking at the first line. When I say, get me the next int, it's going to give me the 1, 2, 3. So this is going to give me the 1, 2, 3. And then this cursor says, oh, we read that. So now I'm going to move down and point to 4, 5, 6. And then when I say next int again, it's going to give me the 4, 5, 6. And it's going to say, you read that. So now I'm pointing to 7, 8, 9. And when I say next int, it's going to give me the 7, 8, 9. And it's going to say, you read that. So now I'm pointing here. And here, there is nothing. When I ask it, has next, it's going to say no. So now when I ask it, do you have something for me to say? It's going to say false. I don't have anything else for you to read. And so this is how the while loop will end. Okay, so let's do that ourselves. So here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my scanner, which is called in. I'm going to say while in has next, while it has something for me to read, I want to read that number in. So I'm going to read that number in. And what do I want to do? I want to add it. So let's create our sum again. And sum equals 0. And I'm going to print it out afterwards. So I'm going to add that number to sum. And then I'm going to just print it out just to make sure that I know what I read. So I'll just say I read in plus num. And let's print the sum at the end. System.out.println sum. Okay, let's just go to the file and add a couple more numbers to it. So here, let's put in some numbers so that we know. And now my file has a bunch of numbers. So now I'm going to go and I'm going to run this code. I don't know how many numbers, so I'm using a while loop that says, while you have something for me to read, go ahead and read it. And so here it shows me that it read all these numbers up to the last 2 7s that I put, and it displayed the total for me. So this was how you would use a file and a scanner object to read in from a file.